Welcome to our 14th annual community breakfast hosted by the Domestic Violence Task Force. The Domestic Violence Task Force serves the harbor communities of Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop. The task force is a group of local agencies dedicated to raising awareness of violence in the home through education, outreach, and access to support. This annual breakfast, along with donations from the community, funds the annual Peace in the Family Day. This free, fun, educational event is held every summer for families in the community to help raise awareness about domestic violence. Each year, we rotate the events among the harbor communities in hopes to promote peace within the home and stop the violence within our communities. Our theme this year is domestic violence and homelessness. I know some of you are still getting your food, but we do have stats in your folders. If you want to open your folders, some of them are on your left-hand side. There's a purple sheet and a white sheet. I pulled a few statistics out. The National Network to End Domestic Violence reports more than 1 in 3 women have experienced rape, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Approximately 7 million are raped or assaulted each year. 1 in 77 men have experienced rape in their lifetime, and 1 in women as well. Based on one study in 2013 by the National Census of Domestic Violence Services, reported by 50 participating programs during a 24-hour period, 2,234 victims were served in one day. 902 domestic violence victims were found refuged in emergency shelters or transitional housing. 463 were children and 439 were adults. 343 had unmet requests for services in one day. This was shelters, transitional housing, legal representation, and financial assistance. 223 were for housing, which is 65%. Some of the reasons that the unmet needs were there was because of resources that weren't available, not enough staffing, governmental funding, private funding, and individual donations. The impact on the domestic violence victims, where 58% had returned to their abusers, 44% were homeless, and 15% end up living in their cars. These stats are very difficult to hear, as finally the victim decides to leave their abuser and they need to find a shelter that's available. And then once they're ready to transition into housing, that housing may not be there for them, a safe, affordable place, so they end up back to their abuser. So the cycle begins again. At this time, how's everybody doing? You still with me? Okay, good. At this time, I would like to ask the Domestic Violence Task Force members to please stand up. And hello? Stand up and please get recognized for your efforts. Thank you. The member agencies are listed in your program as well, and please do not hesitate to mingle and collaborate with everyone. Sharing is caring. Getting to know each other does help the community, and it helps each other to share resources. I would like to introduce our community figures and activists, and if I miss anyone, please, I apologize for that. Who represent our harbor communities. Steve Morabito, Revere City Councilor, if you can please stand up. Is he here? No? Okay, sorry. Peter Gill from Winthrop Town Council. Winthrop Police Department Officer Don Armistead and Sergeant Mary Christophe. Chief Doherty from Revere Fire Department. Chief Caffarelli from Revere Police Department. And Officer Carl Ruggiero, Lieutenant. Did I miss anyone? All right, so I'm gonna now introduce our guest speaker. Our keynote speaker today is Robert DeLeo. Speaker DeLeo has represented the 19th Suffolk County District, including the town of Winthrop and portion of the city of Revere in Massachusetts House of Representatives since 1991. He became the Speaker of Massachusetts House of Representatives in January 2009. On April 1st, 2013, Speaker DeLeo and Attorney General Martha Coakley passed a more comprehensive domestic violence bill. The legislation creates new criminal offenses and penalties, increases prevention efforts, and empowers victims. For example, the bill will seek to train professionals on domestic violence. It supports victims in confidentiality and in the workplace, and will establish fees for domestic violence offenses. The legislation also established a grant program to promote innovative approaches in ending the cycle of domestic violence and empowering victims. Please welcome Speaker Robert DeLeo.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that very nice introduction. And it's great to be here with so many of the strongest advocates that we have in this area, from Revere, Chelsea, and Winthrop. Relative to the legislation which was just discussed, a sincere thank you to, obviously, to the Governor, the Senate President, the Attorney General, who was mentioned earlier, the district attorneys, and I also like to mention one gentleman who is here who also was helpful in putting the legislation together, and that's the great Sheriff of Suffolk County, Steve Tompkins, as well. Thank you. You folks are really the eyes and ears, especially on this issue, in our community. Throughout my tenure as an elected official, from town meeting member to the Speaker of the House, your ability to understand the needs of our neighbors and respond with integrated services has both impressed me and informed me on many issues. Thank you to all of you who also have been a strong voice up on Beacon Hill. And thank you to the Harbor Area Domestic Violence Task Force. I was heartened to learn that domestic violence is the topic of this year's annual breakfast. It can be a very difficult thing to discuss, but events like today, I feel, are imperative if we are to make progress in our efforts to improve the safety and security of our neighbors. Many of the folks here today, as I look around and talk to some folks earlier, were active partners in helping craft our recent domestic violence legislation, which I am told is one of the strongest in the nation. And I sincerely want to thank all of you for your input. And welcome also, obviously, to, as was mentioned earlier, to the elected and appointed officials here today. I'd have to tell you, One of the major reasons that this whole legislation came into being was because of the so-called Jen Martell case. I had the opportunity, I guess like all of us did, to watch that matter unfold. And as I watched it very clearly, and I watched it just like everyone here, whether it was on the television or reading in the newspapers, I looked and I said to myself, that is a tragedy waiting to happen. And unfortunately, sure enough, some 2 or 3 days later, that young, beautiful lady was killed. As a result of that, I had decided as Speaker that something had to be done because something had gone wrong. And I'm not here to blame any particular organization or elected official or anything like that, because I don't think that was the case. But what I was concerned about was the fact that there was some type of failure in the system, and that we could do better. And when I first of all started to talk to folks about that case and other cases, I quickly learned that Massachusetts already had one of the strongest domestic violence cases in the country, and some folks said we should just leave it at that. Well, I decided you just can't leave it at that if you have this continuing cycle of domestic violence. And I'm glad we did, because I think that we improved upon what we already had in place here in Massachusetts, made it stronger, and now again, I think we have probably the strongest law that there is in the country. The other thing that came to mind with me is I had visited and talked to some of the local police officers and police chiefs and some of the folks in the district which I represent, was the high number of domestic violence cases that we have. I was shocked to learn that in some communities, you're talking at a minimum, some 50% of calls which are received at a police station involve some type of domestic violence. For sure, some may be a lot more serious than others. But folks, that is an alarming rate in terms of what's going on. And what's interesting about it is, as I checked these statistics throughout the Commonwealth as we were preparing the bill, I learned that that's just not only the case in this particular district, but is statistics which are shared throughout the Commonwealth. At the end, I think that you all have contributed to this law, which I believe is going to save lives. It was your diverse perspectives that convinced us that our law had, if it's going to be effective, it had to be thorough. And I'd also like to mention the input which I received from many of you relative to the gun violence legislation which we had passed here in Massachusetts. When I first decided that we were going to take on gun violence, which I thought was going to be a fairly easy piece of legislation to pass, and after the 500 nasty emails which I received from throughout Massachusetts and the country, accusing me of everything and anything, and some of the interesting names I was called, well, we'll get into that. This is on tape, so I can't talk about that. But it was very interesting to know how well, in a sense, that law really interreacted with the domestic violence legislation as well. And again, I was told, why touch gun violence law when we have the strongest laws in the country, rated second only to Hawaii? Well, and I can tell you why. Besides the terrible shootings, mass shootings, which seem to be occurring more on a regular basis. I can remember when we used to talk like some of these mall or school shootings or whatnot and say, oh yeah, it's going to happen once a year and that's it. Seems to me it's about happening once a month somewhere in the country. But in addition to that, what I told folks, that this wasn't just about these massive shootings. It was about the day-to-day occurrences that seem to be happening, as we were just discussing this morning in terms of what recently happened in Chelsea, where again, a young lady's life was recently taken from her. But not only that, you know, we could talk on and on and on. It almost seems like we have one of these horrific instances probably once a week. But it is my hope that if we can combine these two pieces of legislation, that we would have had a legislative session that was truly productive and that can bring some safety and peace of mind to women, and I would dare say all of the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That is my hope, and I think that hopefully we have taken a giant step. I firmly believe that the comprehensive action is the only strategy that's going to result in any systematic change. Because of this, our law examines existing loopholes and elevates criminal penalties. More importantly, we prioritize prevention through proactive measures. The law broadens court authority related to custody and child support orders, establishes employment leave for victims of domestic violence, and creates educational programs in our public schools. It also creates a specific charge of strangulation and suffocations, actions that statistically indicate an abuser is more likely to commit domestic violence related to homicide. That was one of the more interesting things as I was studying this issue that I learned. When it came to talk about this issue, my original reaction, well, we already have assault and battery or this or that. But the statistics that were presented to me were alarming in terms of those who commit strangulation or try to commit strangulation, that leads in many cases to an attempt at homicide. So I think that, again, getting that law on the books was very, very important. And again, it was because of the input that I received from people like you that taught me the importance of making sure that we made that change. But in addition to that, I also took it upon myself, most importantly, to talk to some of the victims. I visited some homes and I always get it confused, Newburyport or Amesbury, whatever, somewhere up there, which yesterday they got a lot of rain, and also in Cambridge. And I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to quite a few of the victims, and I heard firsthand exactly, almost word for word in terms of what exactly, happens, how some of these things start, and how they progress. And I heard loudly and clearly about the issues, especially involving strangulation. While we look to the future, it was incumbent upon us also to take immediate action. In recommending preventive tactics, the CDC proposes coordinated services and thorough data systems to help understand trends, provide information, and monitor effectiveness. With this broad background, Massachusetts law also closes a formal loophole. Now law enforcement officials can readily and efficiently identify an offender with a history of domestic violence and take appropriate punitive action. One of the other things I remember, and I'm sorry as I keep on going from some of my prepared remarks to my thoughts, some of the things that I found more interesting. Am I talking too long, by the way? I see she's getting a little nervous over there. I don't know whether you keep on walking, give me the hook or something, I don't know. But one of the most fascinating issues as well, which I learned, that I'm not sure how many folks even realize that, but we had a domestic violence law that was, we had a second domestic violence, a second offense domestic violence, which was a wonderful law to have. But then I learned we had a little bit of a problem. We never had a first offense, so the second offense could never really take effect. These were the type of loopholes and problems that I see some of my good friends over here, the lawyers, say, yeah, you're right, because they probably told me about it, which helped us greatly, to close that loophole, to make our laws stronger and more meaningful. The legislation also standardizes records and mandates that information is shared across districts, ensuring that key decision makers have up-to-date, accurate, and exhaustive criminal records. These components, among others, are immediate actions that will help victims gain security and independence. But as we drafted the law, we knew we had to create mechanisms for continued improvement. I have heard many times that homelessness and housing security is one of the biggest challenges facing those that confronting intimate partner violence. The law establishes a special commission to examine the housing and shelter options available to victims of domestic and sexual violence. By this coming June, the commission will report on the state of the current affairs and how we can expand these resources through legislation. Massachusetts has established an encompassing law. In doing so, we've positioned ourselves for future leadership. Because today is about opening dialogue that will help us to consistently improve, I'd also like to mention a bold provision included in the law. The legislation creates a domestic fatality review teams to review and to learn from the tragic instances of violence. One of the major hopes that I have with this legislation is to correct and help and to limit these issues of violence. And one of the words that I always took with me and was thinking about throughout this whole process of, maybe it was about a year of review, was what I heard consistently from people involved with this issue on a day-to-day basis, that they felt it was preventable. If I heard that word once, I heard it 100 times from everyone I spoke to, that they felt it was preventable. And that word always just kept on in my mind as we talked about it and how we could do things. And as I would sometimes read about domestic violence that occurred and tragic results, and I would look and I would say, could that have been preventable? Could we have saved that woman's life? And I think that was probably the most important thought anyways that I had as we went through this process. But this effort, which I talked about, these review teams will require cooperation, commitment, and professional and emotional fortitude. However, we will not shirk from what I feel is our civic responsibility. As the law takes shape, it is imperative to continue our efforts and learn how to effectively stem the tragic tide of domestic violence. Today, I feel, is a valuable step in that direction. It is my hope and my pledge that we will keep the lines of communications open as we work to create safer communities where individuals receive the legal and the medical support that they so rightly deserve. I'd also want to mention and thank some of the folks in my district. As a matter of fact, that some of our finest over there had told me today that in Winthrop, for instance, I guess that they see the law and they see some of the positive effects already in terms of working. So that's what today is all about. By the way, as we begin our new legislative session, this law wasn't meant as something to be written on a piece of paper just to, sit there and to be enforced. I'd like to hear from you as we move along and get ready for a new legislation in terms of how it is working, how we can make it better, how it isn't working, so that I and all my colleagues will have good statistics relative to that. I want to congratulate all the women being honored here this morning. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a pleasure to work with some of you. And for those of you who I have not worked on this issue, I look forward to working with you in the future. Again, I want to thank you for being part of this conversation. And although I guess I was a late fill-in today, for those of you expecting someone else, I'm sorry about it. You got me, all right? I sincerely and most importantly want to thank each and every one of you, because you are the keys. We can write the laws and that's all well and good, but you folks are the people on the front lines each and every day in our efforts to try to stem the tide of domestic violence. Thank you, and thank you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you, Speaker. We appreciate you being here. Okay, next we are going to bring the award recipients up. This year's Community Peace Building Awards honor community members for their work towards ending domestic violence. Kate Leonard from Haven, Mass General, will now introduce the Public Service Award recipients. Liza Hirsch and Susan Elson are the award recipients. Thank you.
Mass Law Reform Institute is a statewide nonprofit poverty law and policy center. Its mission is to advance economic, racial, and social justice through legal action, policy advocacy, coalition building, and community outreach. MLRI works both directly and indirectly on behalf of survivors of domestic violence who have been denied shelter through DHCD. They also host in-depth trainings for community advocates on the rights of homeless survivors in order to effectively advocate for this population. Finally, MLRI maintains and is a significant contributor to the website masslegalhelp.org, which provides up-to-date, comprehensive, and accessible information about many aspects of the legal process and rights people have related to unemployment, domestic violence, housing, immigration, health, and much more. Liza and Susan epitomize the mission of MLRI. They work tirelessly to advocate for the rights of survivors of domestic violence. We are so happy to honor them in their work today.
Just want to say a few words, which is that our work, like so much of domestic violence work, would not have been possible without a community of support. So I just want to briefly acknowledge some of the key supporters of our work on behalf of domestic violence survivors seeking shelter for themselves and their children. First of all, our colleague Ruth Berkwin, without whose work our work just wouldn't, on behalf of domestic violence survivors, wouldn't have happened. We want to acknowledge all the domestic violence survivor provider programs and legal services programs who supported our testimony on behalf of these survivors and who spoke and testified. Specifically also Joanne Timmons, Sheridan Haynes, and we especially want to recognize the Department of Housing and Community Development, which agreed with our proposals. Rose Evans, who is the Associate Director of Housing Stabilization at DHCD, is here with us today, and we have been working with them for over a year now to really ensure that domestic violence survivors and their children get the shelter that they need. So thanks so much on behalf of both of us.
Next, Next, Emmy Portal from North Suffolk Mental Health will introduce the Community Activism Award to Donna Lee Mullaney. Emmy?
Well, I am very proud to be presenting this award. It's actually one of my very own employees within our department at the Community Service Agency at North Suffolk. So what do we say about Donna Lee Mullaney? She is a family partner. She's actually a frontline worker, as the speaker was mentioning, one of those frontline workers that work directly with survivors. If I was to choose a word to describe Donna, it would be a fighter, and not in the negative connotation that actually kind of pops in our mind when we hear that word fighter. I mean someone who is not afraid to fight, stand up, and defend those who need defending and those who need comforting. And these things are highlighted in the types of work that she has done throughout the years. Foster parent, nurse's aide, and one especially close to me, pet loss and grief counseling. It is my great pleasure to pronounce that Donna Lee Mullaney has won this award. And Donna, I just want to say that the work that you do, I know that you were very concerned about receiving this award, and this is because she's a very humble person. But you have earned this award because you are the type of person that is willing to push against the grain and fight for those individuals that you feel are tipped to that balance. If you see that things are not fair, if there is an area of justice that needs to be pointed out and highlighted, Donna is that voice within our department that does that. And that is something to be proud of. And we need more workers like that out in the field. That's what's going to really push this type of advocacy work. Thank you, Donna Lee. Please come.
I just want to say thank you very much, and I feel very honored and blessed. Thank you so much.
Next, I will introduce Lee Nugent from CAPIC. She will be bringing up another Community Activism Award recipient, Sylvia Fermenta.
Good morning. There's so much I could say about Sylvia, but I would venture to guess that there's probably 10 people in this room that do not know Sylvia or have not heard her name or referred somebody to Sylvia at CAPIC. Sylvia's worked for CAPIC for 25 years. I've worked with her for 16 years, and I can tell you in that 16 years, I've watched how she has helped more people, countless people, with housing, clothing, food, furniture, and helping them to move that furniture into their new homes. I know because she's dragged me along with her a few times. She is incredible, and this is a long overdue award. I walk in Market Basket with her, and it takes a half an hour to get through the aisles for all the people that have to come up and hug Sylvia. And then she would tell me, she was my client 10 years ago. Oh, she was my client 5 years ago. They don't forget Sylvia. 2 weeks ago, briefly, I had a young man who came in looking for housing help with his family. For his family, he's now homeless. And he asked me, he said, "Is that nice Spanish lady still work here?" I said, "You must mean Sylvia." He said, "Yeah, her. Is she still here?" I said, "Yeah, she is." He said, "My mom, who has since passed away, always talked about her because she helped her so much many years ago when we were kids." So that's the person that Sylvia Fermetta is. She is compassionate, caring, very non-judgmental, and doesn't know the word no. If somebody comes in and wants help, if she doesn't have the resources, she will find the resources. She has never, ever said to anyone, "We can't help you," or "I can't help you." She will find a way, even if it means going into her own purse, to take money out for bus fare, coffee, or something to eat. I could go on, but this is a long overdue award for a very special woman. Sylvia Fermetta.
Wow. That was good. Oh, thank you, Liz, so much. I have a little bit of speech here, and I hope that just bear with me. First of all, I would like to say a big thank to everyone who's here today, especially to the member of the Church of Revere and Winter Domestic Violence Task Force. I'm getting nervous now. But especially in particular to my co-worker and friend, Lee Nguyen. Thank you. Who nominated me, as well as the committee who selected me to receive this award. Thank you. I would like to also say thank you to the speaker, Robert DeLeo, for being here today, and for his continued support for CAPEC and local families in need. I also want to thank my boss, Robert Repucci, for his hard work and for being such an amazing and compassionate leader, and my co-workers who are here today. I can't mention everybody's name, but they know who they are, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I would like to also say thank you to my beautiful daughter, Cecilia, who took time from her busy schedule and came from Connecticut to be here today. Thank you. Also, I keep doing it. My two wonderful nieces, Lisette and Nadia, they came here today. Thank you so much. It is an honor for me to be here today. I accept this award with great pride, and I would like to share it with all of you who are here present today, who work so hard each day to put an end to domestic violence. And you know who you are, everyone here. I am very proud of the work that we do at CAPI, and more importantly, so proud to work with such a wonderful group of people. For me to be able to help families in need on a daily basis and give them hope for a better life is my best reward. To conclude, I want to let the family of the victim who lost her life this past weekend in Chelsea, that they are in my thought and my prayer. God bless you. Que Dios me lo bendiga. Gracias. Thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart. Okay.
Now I'm walking up.
Congratulations, ladies. We're pretty much wrapping it up. I want to say special thanks to the Revere VFW, Wyndham Chelsea, Central Latino, and for everyone attending today. Please continue to spread the word against violence within the home and peace amongst all of us. And feel free to chit-chat with everyone and get to know each other better. Thank you, and thanks for listening to me today. Take care.